This man is Chris Montano. He lived with his wife and a daughter that he loved so much. He was a former captain of the United States Marines who retired 2 years ago. That morning, his wife, who worked as a property agent, would go out of the city for a few days. In the evening, when Chris was cooking food, he was contacted by his wife. Chris then told her that a few hours ago, he had just been contacted by the French ambassador, who asked him to train France's special forces. Hearing that, his wife asked him not to accept the offer until she returned. Not long after, 2 FBI agents visited the house. Chris asked what their purpose of coming was, and the two told him that his wife was not a property agent, but a cartel member from Mexico who smuggled drugs and trafficked women. Upon hearing that, Chris certainly didn't believe it, considering that he and his wife had been married for 18 years, and he knew her very well. The two showed all the evidence that made Chris's feelings uncomfortable. Even the two had evidence of the flight of his wife to Mexico. A few hours later, Chris tried to contact his wife, but unfortunately, her phone was not active. Suddenly, Chris was contacted by someone who turned out to be a Mexican mafia. The man said that the FBI was right about Chris's wife, but unfortunately, her cartel group was the man's business rival and she was being held hostage by him. If Chris wanted to save his wife, then he must go to his headquarters in Mexico. Hearing this, Chris decided to play along, but before that, he took his daughter to stay at his mother's house. The next day, Chris drove the car at full speed to go to the headquarters. Arriving there, he immediately got out of the car and went inside. Without further ado, he beat the guards there. He then pointed his gun at 2 chefs who were about to cook. The two begged for forgiveness, saying that they were only working there and never interfered with the mafia's business. Chris finally ordered them to leave there immediately. He then continued killing the guards. The mafia then showed up and casually said that he was very much looking forward to Chris's arrival. He explained that his group would release his wife on the condition that he had to work with him for 6 hours. Hearing this, Chris refused and threatened to kill him. But he replied that if he was killed, then it was certain that Chris's wife would also suffer the same fate. As a result, Chris gave up and was willing to work for him for 6 hours. The mafia explained that Chris's job was to finish off 6 rival mafia bosses within 6 hours. He had prepared the cars and weapons needed and would send the identity and location of the targets through message. He promised that if Chris completed his assignment, he would release his wife. Chris went to the garage to get the car that had been prepared, but when entered, the 2 chefs from before were hiding in there. Chris immediately asked the 2 to leave, but they refused and begged him to get them out of there. The 2 also said that they could guide him and were ready to take him anywhere. In the end, Chris allowed the 2 to come with him. On the trip, the 2 said that they were brothers looking for their missing sister, and that was why they disguised themselves as chefs. But unfortunately, their sister wasn't there. Hearing this, Chris said hope they could find their sister. Long story short, Chris had arrived at his first target. He asked the 2 to wait in the car while he was going to finish off the mafia leader in the house. He then approached the building and a shootout ensued. After finishing some of the guards, Chris asked a female guard there to leave because he did not want to kill a woman. The woman decided to leave by not fighting Chris. After that, Chris killed the guards inside the building. Chris managed to corner his target. The target had asked if Chris was sent by his rival because he knew that someone wanted his territory, but Chris did not want to answer. The man then offered Chris a lot of money if Chris did not finish him off, but Chris replied that it was not about money. The target tried to attack Chris, so he finished him off. He also took a photo of the target to prove that he had successfully eliminated his first target. At the same time, he was sent a photo of the second target who was in a restaurant at that moment. Chris left the building and met the chef while driving one of the cars belonging to his target before. Chris asked the 2 not to follow him. He also moved his weapon to his new car and hurried away, leaving the 2. Later, Chris arrived at a parking lot, and he was going to finish off his second target by shooting with a sniper from that place, but then the 2 chefs showed up. At first, Chris was angry because he didn't like a company while carrying out missions, but the 2 said that they were just looking for their sister, and they were both sure one of the targets was the one who took her. Hearing that, Chris didn't care because his mission was so dangerous and he didn't want anyone else to get killed. After that, Chris walked to the top of the building and aimed his target, who was inside the restaurant. When the target was waiting for his order, suddenly he got shot. Chris successfully killed him with his sniper. When Chris was about to return to the parking lot, he was asked about the proof of his next work, but Chris explained that he finished off his target from a distance, so he couldn't get the photo. Fortunately, the mafia believed in him, but for the next target, He wanted proof in the form of photo, and if not provided, he wouldn't hesitate to do something to Chris's wife. When Chris was in the parking lot, he was approached by a group of people who wanted to finish him off. Chris managed to eliminate most of them, but unfortunately, his gun ran out of bullets. There was one enemy left, and it was none other than the woman he let go before. The woman who realized that Chris had run out of bullet casually approached him, but before she had time to shoot, suddenly she was shot. It turned out that the person who shot her was the chef who kept wanting to come with Chris. After that, Chris received message from Sanchez about his third target. Chris finally invited the two chefs to come with him. In the middle of the trip, Chris was contacted by the Mafia, who reminded him that the time he was given was only a few hours left. He also said that Chris had a daughter and he might do something to her if Chris messed up. Hearing this, Chris was upset. He threatened to kill him if he dared to touch his family. Chris immediately contacted his daughter to make sure that she was safe. He then told her to stay with her grandmother in a motel for a while. Chris and the two chefs had arrived near the residence of the third target. They monitored the movement of the target, who was swooning behind the house. Chris told the two to stay while monitoring while he would infiltrate the place. When Chris managed to infiltrate the place, he finished off the guards without hesitation. He managed to corner his target at gunpoint. His target said that Chris must be sent to kill him by his rival. He climbed out of the pool and tried to bribe Chris, but secretly he wanted to take a gun. Chris managed to dodge the bullet, and when the target ran out of bullets, Chris came out of the pool and shot him dead. He also sent a photo of the target and asked for information about the next target. Then he came back to the two chefs and invited them to go to the fourth target. Chris and the two chefs arrived at the fourth target. Chris asked the two chefs to wait in the car, and if within 30 minutes he did not return, then the two had to help him. He tried to infiltrate the place but stopped by 3 female guards, so he had to pin them down. Meanwhile, the fourth target was inside, playing with his girls. Suddenly, Chris kicked the door and pointed his gun at the man, but the man's wife, who turned out to be one of the female guards he pinned down before, came from behind and pointed her gun at him. He was asked to drop his gun, but suddenly, one of the girls there picked up the gun and shot the female guard. The target shot Chris, but fortunately it wasn't fatal. Chris himself managed to kill his target with a knife he threw at him. The girl who helped Chris was Savannah. She invited Chris to go to the house of her friend, who was a veterinarian. On the other hand, the two FBI agents who used to come to Chris's house visited a motel to look for Chris's daughter. It turned out that these two worked for the Mafia. The two forcibly took Chris's daughter after killing her grandmother. Chris and the chef were at Savannah's friend's house. Savannah immediately calmed her friend because her friends thought that Chris was a bad guy. She explained that they came for help because Chris had just been shot. Chris was treated. After that, when Sakana's friend was about to pour a drink for the chefs, the two chefs were surprised when they saw the necklace worn by her. The two asked where she got the necklace from, and she replied that she got her necklace from her mother when she was 10 years old. Hearing that, the two immediately cried because it turned out that she was their missing sister. Later, Chris prepared himself to complete his mission. The two chefs wanted to help Chris, but Chris refused because he knew the goal of the two chefs to find their sister had been completed. Hearing this, the two still insisted on helping to thank Chris for his help. In the middle of the trip, the Mafia gave the location of the fifth target, but Chris only had less than 30 minutes left, while his task was to finish off 2 targets. The Mafia explained that Chris was lucky because the 5th and 6th targets were in the same place, so Chris could go straight killing both at the same time. At a car junkyard, an old man who was the 5th target was waiting for his client. When his client showed up, the client turned out to be Chris's wife, revealing that all this time she was not kidnapped. The Mafia was only playing with Chris. Her name was Sarah. She immediately gave the women the old man would buy. At this point, Chris was unaware that the 6th target was Sarah because the Mafia referred to Sarah by Jade LaBarca. Chris and the 2 chefs had arrived at a graveyard. Chris said that the target was behind the grave, or precisely at the location of the junkyard. Soon he was contacted by the corrupt FBI agent who said that Chris must immediately complete the task. The FBI agent told him that he had just kidnapped his daughter. Chris was furious to hear that, and he promised that if his daughter was harmed, then he would finish off them very cruelly. The 5th target had just transferred the money to Sarah as payment for the women when suddenly, Chris showed up and shot at them. Sarah managed to dodge the bullet, still not realizing that the one shooting at her was Chris. Chris followed her until they faced each other. Chris didn't expect that Sarah was really part of a cartel, while Sarah also didn't expect that Chris could come to this place. The fifth target suddenly appeared from behind and was ready to finish off Chris, but Sarah immediately killed him. After that, Sarah explained everything to Chris. Her biological father was the leader cartel that ruled Mexico who had died 10 years ago. She was forced by the two FBI agents to become an informant so that no one would continue her father's business, but unexpectedly, the two FBI agents betrayed her and conspired with the rival cartel who wanted to claim her father's business. She wanted to stop being an informant, but the FBI agents threatened the safety of Chris and their daughter, and that left her with no choice. It was revealed that Chris's targets were the candidates of Sarah's father's replacement, including Sarah herself. Chris said that their daughter was being held hostage, and the only way to save their daughter was to kill her. Hearing that, Sarah asked Chris to just kill her, and after thinking for a long time, in the end, Chris was forced to kill her. He then sent a photo of Sarah and the fifth target, and after that, Chris approached the two chefs and told them to leave while pretending that his mission had been finished. The two chefs finally said goodbye. Not long after, Chris showed up and asked the Mafia to hand over his daughter. When his daughter was released, the FBI agents said that Chris must have been devastated because he had to lose his wife and his mother in one day. Hearing that, Chris was very shocked. He tried to attack him, but he was beaten. It turned out that they also intended to finish off Chris because they knew that Chris would target them if left alive. But when the Mafia was going to shoot Chris, Sarah, who turned out to be still alive, suddenly showed up. It was revealed that before she was shot, Chris had given her a bulletproof vest to save her from injury. Chris was cornered by the Mafia, but fortunately, someone shot Sanchez. Apparently, the shooter was one of the chefs who insisted on following Chris. The Mafia rushed to the helicopter and fled from the place. On the other hand, Sarah managed to finish off the female FBI agent along with some of Sanchez's men. Chris was trying to calm his daughter down, but unknowingly, he was shot by the corrupt FBI agent from behind. Chris was cornered and about to be killed when suddenly Sarah appeared. Unfortunately, she ran out of bullets. The FBI agent pointed his gun at Sarah, and that was when Chris had a chance to shoot him after his daughter gave him his gun. In the end, Chris and her family managed to survive the incident. 3 months later, during a Chinese New Year event, the Mafia who turned out to be still alive was driving a car. When he was about to pass the people there, a bike stopped beside his car and stabbed his neck. The bikers turned out to be Chris and Sarah. The incident was not seen by anyone because the two chefs who were also there deliberately covered the car.